The phone's shrill ring cut through the otherwise silent London flat. Midnight. Jason Statham, a man whose knuckles were more accustomed to bone than brushed cotton sheets, grunted, pulling the device from the nightstand. He hadn't sought this quiet life. But after years of black ops and impossible missions, a self-imposed exile felt right. Statham, he rasped, his voice a low rumble that could intimidate seasoned criminals. A voice, cold and synthetic, answered. If you hang up this phone, a major city will cease to exist. Statham's hand tightened around the phone. Prank calls weren't uncommon, remnants of a past he couldn't entirely shake, but the voice. The calculated precision. It sent a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the London weather. He knew. Instinctively, this was no joke. His retired life was about to get a violent wake-up call. The stranger's voice continued, laying out the rules of a deadly game. The clock had started ticking. Prove it, Statham growled, the word a challenge, a dare. The stranger remained unfazed. Consider this a demonstration. Look out your window, Mr. Statham. At precisely 12:03, the flower shop across the street will experience a minor incident. Statham moved swiftly, adrenaline already coursing through his veins. He reached the window just as the digital clock on his microwave flickered to 12:03. A heartbeat later, a contained but violent explosion ripped through the flower shop. The windows shattered outwards, sending shards of glass and floral debris scattering across the street. No massive destruction, but undeniably real. Satisfied, the voice dripped with chilling amusement. Now, Mr. Statham, for the main event. A city hangs in the balance. Your cooperation is required. Fail, and millions will pay the price. Your first task. A series of instructions followed, each more unbelievable and morally compromising than the last. The game had begun. The first task was simple, almost insulting. Retrieve a specific package from a secure lockbox at Victoria Station. But Statham knew better than to underestimate the subtle layers of the game. While outwardly complying, his mind was already dissecting the call, the explosion, the stranger's voice. He rerouted the call through multiple firewalls, attempting to trace its origin, but the signal vanished into the digital ether. Flashback, Kabul, 2010. Statham, younger, harder, disarming a pressure-sensitive bomb with seconds to spare. The same icy focus now gripped him. He accessed hidden files on his encrypted laptop, calling up old contacts, favors. He needed information, anything to give him an edge. The lockbox itself was child's play, but the feeling of being a pawn, a puppet dancing to a stranger's tune, gnawed at him. What was the endgame, and why him? The package from the lockbox contained a single SIM card. A burner, of course. As predicted, inserting it into a disposable phone brought another call. This time, the voice was different, distorted. Almost childlike. Good job, Mr. Statham, you follow instructions well. Then came the second task, disrupt the power grid in a specific sector of the city for precisely 5 minutes. A test of your capabilities, the voice chirped. Statham hesitated. Blackouts could cause chaos, potentially harm innocents, but the flower shop was a grim reminder of the stranger's capabilities. He had to play along, at least for now. While he dug deeper, he bypassed the system, triggering the blackout but simultaneously alerted emergency services, minimizing the impact. He was walking a tightrope, balancing obedience with a flicker of conscience. The stranger, however, seemed to anticipate his every move. Clever, Mr. Statham, but don't think you can outsmart me. The next task escalated dramatically, sabotage a high-speed train, ensuring a minor delay but no fatalities. This was no longer a game of cat and mouse, it was a descent into moral quicksand. Statham felt the weight of potential lives on his shoulders. He couldn't directly cause an accident. Instead, he used his skills to trigger a false alarm in the train's braking system, forcing an emergency stop in a remote area. Passengers would be inconvenienced, frightened, but alive. He reported back to the stranger, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage. Satisfactory, the distorted voice echoed. But your compassion is unnecessary. The next task will require a different approach. Flashback, Sarajevo, 1998. A split-second decision. Save one, condemn dozens. The ghost of that choice still haunted him. The stranger's escalating demands were designed to break him, to erode his conscience, but Statham wouldn't break. He would bend, adapt, and find a way to turn the tables. He had to. The different approach involved framing a prominent politician for a crime he didn't commit. The stranger supplied the evidence, meticulously fabricated, and instructed Statham to plant it. This was no longer about minimizing harm, it was about actively creating injustice. Statham stalled, arguing. Trying to buy time. He reviewed the fabricated evidence. It was too clean, too perfect. A detail caught his eye, a specific type of rare ink only manufactured in one facility in Prague. A faint connection. A thread in the darkness. He followed the stranger's instructions, planting the evidence, but simultaneously alerted a trusted journalist, providing her with subtle clues to expose the frame-up. He was playing a dangerous game, double-crossing a man who held the fate of a city in his hands, but the need to fight back, to regain control, was overwhelming. Each task, each compromise, fueled his determination to uncover the truth. The pieces were slowly starting to fall into place. The Prague connection led Statham to a name, Viktor Novak, a disgraced ink manufacturer known for his obsessive security measures and radical anti-establishment views. Novak had vanished 5 years ago, presumed dead after a factory fire, but Statham knew better than to trust presumptions. He dug deeper, cross-referencing Novak's past associates with his own history. A pattern emerged. Several of Novak's closest contacts had been indirectly affected by Statham's past missions, collateral damage in the pursuit of larger objectives. Was this revenge? The stranger's next task involved disabling security cameras at a specific bank in London. The bank's proximity to the Houses of Parliament, combined with Novak's anti-government rhetoric, sent a chilling wave of realization through Statham. London. The target was London. And Novak was planning something far more devastating than a simple explosion. He was aiming for the heart of the city. The realization that London was the target hit Statham hard. He felt a surge of protectiveness for a city he had, in many ways, adopted as his own, but the ethical tightrope he was walking was fraying. Each task chipped away at his soul, forcing him to become the very thing he had spent his life fighting against. He considered defying Novak, hanging up the phone, gambling that he could somehow stop the threat before it was too late, but the image of the flower shop, the chilling precision of Novak's power, held him back. Millions of lives were at stake. Flashback, Beirut, 2006. A failed mission. Innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. The faces of the victims seared into his memory. He couldn't allow history to repeat itself. He had to find another way, a way to stop Novak without sacrificing his own integrity. But time was running out and Novak's demands were becoming increasingly audacious, pushing him closer to the edge. The internal conflict raged. How far was he willing to go to save a city? He needed help. He couldn't do this alone. He reached out to Sarah Chin, a former MI6 analyst, a brilliant tech whiz with a knack for deciphering the impossible. They had a history, a complicated one, forged in the fires of covert operations. He trusted her implicitly. He met her in a secluded pub, relaying the events of the past few hours, the phone calls, the tasks, the mounting dread. Sarah listened intently, her expression hardening with each revelation. Novak, she said, her voice grim. I remember the file, obsessive, meticulous, and completely insane. Sarah immediately began working on tracing Novak's signal, employing cutting-edge technology and her unparalleled hacking skills. Sharing the burden with Sarah lifted a weight off Statham's shoulders. Her objective viewpoint offered a fresh perspective, revealing nuances he had overlooked. They were a team again, facing an impossible challenge with the fate of London hanging in the balance. Together, they might just stand a chance. I've got something, Sarah announced, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Novak's been bouncing his signal through a series of encrypted servers, but I've managed to isolate the last known location, a derelict warehouse in the Docklands. The pieces were falling into place, but with terrifying clarity. The bank's security cameras, the anti-government rhetoric, the location of the warehouse, it all pointed to a coordinated attack on Parliament. Novak wasn't just planning an explosion. He was planning a massacre. The weight of responsibility pressed down on Statham with renewed force. He had to stop Novak, not just to save London, but to prevent a catastrophic blow to democracy itself. He knew time was critical. Every second counted. They had to move now. Let's go, he said, his voice tight with determination. We're paying Novak a visit. The city's fate rested on their shoulders. As they sped towards the Docklands, Sarah delved deeper into Novak's history, uncovering a crucial piece of information. The factory fire that supposedly killed Novak 5 years ago wasn't an accident. It was arson orchestrated by a rival ink manufacturer who had been secretly backed by a covert MI6 operation. An operation Statham had been indirectly involved in. Novak hadn't died, he had been rebuilt, fueled by vengeance. He blamed Statham not just for the loss of his business, but for the death of his family who had perished in the fire. This wasn't just about anti-government sentiment, it was a deeply personal vendetta. Flashback. A blurred image of a burning building. Statham's face, etched with regret, watching from a distance. Asterisk. Statham understood now. He was being punished for sins he hadn't directly committed, but sins he was nonetheless responsible for. The weight of his past, the collateral damage of his choices, had come back to haunt him in the most devastating way possible. They arrived at the warehouse, a hulking metal structure looming over the dark waters of the Thames. The air crackled with tension. Statham kicked in the door, revealing a scene of organized chaos. Wires snaked across the floor, connecting to a complex array of electronic devices. A large screen displayed a live feed of the Houses of Parliament. Novak wasn't there, but his presence was palpable. Sarah immediately began working to disable the device. A sophisticated network of explosives designed to detonate simultaneously, leveling the building. Statham moved through the warehouse, searching for Novak, anticipating an ambush. Suddenly, the phone rang. It was Novak. "Too late, Mr. Statham," his voice hissed. "The countdown has begun. You can't stop it." He revealed a secondary trigger, a dead man's switch requiring his constant input to prevent detonation. Killing him wouldn't stop the bomb, it would guarantee its activation. The race against time had just become infinitely more desperate. "Where are you, Novak?" Statham roared into the phone, his voice laced with fury. "Close enough to watch you fail, Mr. Statham," Novak replied, his voice distorted but chillingly clear. "I'm giving you one last chance. Publicly confess your sins, admit your role in my family's death, and I might consider disarming the device." It was a trap. Statham knew. A public confession would destroy his reputation, invalidate his past actions, and potentially endanger countless others he had worked with, but could he risk it? The clock was ticking, each second bringing London closer to annihilation. Sarah, meanwhile, was frantically working to bypass the dead man's switch, but the system was too complex, too well designed. They were running out of options. Statham had to buy her time. To engage Novak in a battle of wits, to find a weakness in his plan. He had to play the game one last time. "Tell me, Novak," Statham began, his voice deceptively calm, "what will destroying Parliament truly achieve?" "It's not about achieving anything, Statham," Novak sneered. "It's about making you suffer, about making you understand the pain you inflicted on me." Statham realized that Novak wasn't interested in politics or revenge on the government. He was solely focused on Statham's personal torment. The choice became agonizingly clear. He could sacrifice his reputation, his future, everything he had worked for, and confess, hoping Novak would keep his word. Or he could risk everything, gambling that Sarah could find a solution even as the seconds ticked away. Asterisk flashback, a young Statham facing a similar impossible choice. Save his team or complete the mission. He chose the mission, a decision that haunted him to this day. Asterisk. He couldn't make the same mistake again. He couldn't sacrifice innocent lives for some abstract ideal. He had to find another way. "Novak," Statham said, his voice firm, "I'm not going to confess to something I didn't do, but I am willing to offer you something else." "What could you possibly offer me, Statham, that I want?" Novak spat. "Closure," Statham said, his voice steady. "I know who ordered the hit on your factory. I know who benefited from your downfall. I can give you their names, their locations. I can give you the chance to truly have your revenge, not on innocent people, but on those who destroyed your life." It was a gamble, a desperate attempt to appeal to Novak's desire for justice, however twisted. There was a moment of silence, a beat of hesitation. Then, Novak spoke, his voice laced with doubt. "Prove it." Statham rattled off names, dates, and locations, information he had kept buried for years, intel that could ignite a global conflict. It was a dangerous game, but it was the only card he had left to play. Sarah, seeing her opportunity, made a final, desperate attempt to override the dead man's switch, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. The countdown clock ticked down to 0. And stopped. The line went dead. The warehouse fell silent. Statham and Sarah exchanged a look of exhausted relief. London was safe for now. The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of activity. The authorities swarmed the warehouse, dismantling the device, securing the area. Statham and Sarah vanished into the night, ghosts once more. The information Statham had provided to Novak unleashed a chain of events that reverberated across the globe, exposing corruption and sparking conflict. The world would never be the same. As for Statham, he was left to grapple with the consequences of his choices. He had saved London, but at what cost? He had compromised his values, revealed dangerous secrets, and opened old wounds. He returned to his quiet life. But the silence was now filled with the echoes of what he had done. The phone remained on his nightstand, a constant reminder that the past is never truly buried and that some calls can change everything. His retirement was over. A new chapter had begun.